It's nice and cool in here, a little bit more. Yeah? Let's give it up for the mole.
Yeah.
Woo! Mole was awesome. Thank you, Casey, for putting this all together on the Veggie Lucien side.
Yeah.
Casey's awesome. For those of you that don't know, Veggie Lucien is our beneficiary for the year. So all the proceeds all the money that we make throughout the year and we raise goes directly back to them for our project build. So we're gonna have a build day coming up in August, and we're gonna all sit over on the farm and figure out how we can work with the Veggie Lucien team to kind of create whatever space they're trying to create and redesign, maybe even that little area right behind where everybody signed in. Yeah. So lots of cool things that are going to happen here on the farm. Last year we raised $15,000 for them. So we're hoping this year to do the same. So that'll give us a nice chunk of change to really do something great for them. So
do you want to say a little bit more about Veggie Lucien?
Yeah, I would like just a quick.
No, absolutely.
Oh, right. What do I need the mic? I've got a mic. So thank you so much for being here. First of all, my name is Casey Hill. I'm the executive director of Veggie Lucien, and I see Emily Schwing is in the audience as well. I cannot take full credit for putting this all together. This team is incredible. We're small but mighty, and that speaks to how important it is to have support from wonderful people like you. That's how we do this work. So yes, Veggie Lucien, our mission is to connect people from diverse backgrounds through food and farming to build community in East San Jose. We welcome people from all over Silicon Valley, but we place particular focus through our mission and our programming on the low-income working immigrant residents of East San Jose. So much I could say about all of that, but I want to say one thing in particular about how great it is to be working with you to reimagine that little space that is currently our farm stand and will remain our farm stand. But we would love to redesign, for you to help us redesign it, to be able to utilize it as more of a, someone said earlier, a lounging library. I think interpreting what I was saying was like a, community living room, but somewhere where people can actually sit down, take a load off, have a cup of coffee, meet someone, be in conversation, which we think is incredibly important for building bonds and ties among community members. So we're super excited to do that. And East San Jose in particular, not to get too, political here, but we aren't always the first in line for infrastructure and capital investment. It's not the fault of the City of the Parks necessarily, but investment in parks and in city infrastructure isn't always incredibly equitable. And so when we have an extra lift like this, we're able to kind of make up some of that difference. And infrastructure is one of the hardest things to get funded, design services, things like that. So I just want to plug that. It's really, really important. So thank you so much for being here for us.
And another round of applause for these wonderful people who planned this whole event tonight. So, thank you. And now it's your turn.
Great, ready to start? Cool. I'm
Do you
good.
need this?
No,
Okay.
I would
Great.
like to ask from you guys a time check at some point along the way, if we get a little windy. Cool. Well, thank you guys. We're super excited to have all of you guys here. Welcome to Design of the Future. My name is Chris Good. I'm the creative director at One Workplace, and we're super excited to have you guys all here to join in this conversation about something that's very near and dear to my heart, food, or at least near and dear to my cravings. So we have an amazing panel here tonight that are going to be sharing their insights and their backgrounds and ideas on how we might solve some pretty significant and big and maybe sometimes scary challenges in front of us. By 2050, the world population is likely going to exceed 9.5 billion people. And to feed that many people, we're going to have to double our food production, which is a kind of scary thing. Double our food production. Maybe it's an easy thing for us to tackle, maybe not, especially when you consider that agriculture alone consumes 75% of our clean water. 40% of our occupiable land mass is devoted to agriculture. And it also produces 25% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Methane is 20 times more toxic than CO2. Those are pretty scary stats. You guys get to solve that tonight. I'm super excited for this. Because the way that we grow and distribute and consume food, it's not sustainable, and something will have to change. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And before we do, we're going to do a little introduction for you guys. So the really awkward part of this is I get to talk about you for a few minutes. And I'll read these really amazing bios. And then later, if I totally lied and told stories about you guys get to correct it for me. So you can hold on to that. So we'll begin with Severin. So Parisian-born Severin Secret, sitting on the far end, is the owner and principal of Go-To Design Studio, an award-winning interior design firm located in Saratoga. Severin's an expert in sustainability and in shaping space to enhance the live-work experience for her customers and her clients. A little bit of applause for Severin. Sitting next to me, Bob Altendorf, parlayed a career in mortgage banking to create an opportunity to use food for good. Stepping outside of his job in finance, Bob pursued a dream, becoming a classically trained chef, hence the very, very cool chef's coat. Catering for corporate and private events and charities, raising over $1 million for education in San Jose. Today, Bob is also now the chef and founder of Bob's Crazy Good Food, a direct-to-consumer natural food line. Yeah. Have it for Bob. Yeah. And lastly, our host, Casey Hill from Veggie. Casey is originally from Austin, Texas, but arrived here in San Jose by way of Morelia, New York City, and Tokyo. Previously, she worked with the Japan Organic Agriculture Association, the New York Academy of Medicine, and the Children's Hospital at Montefiore. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
Awesome. As a culinary gardener and garden educator, she believes that good food, local community, and social networks, the good old-fashioned kind with real people, are what make us healthy and strong. Before we go any further, I'm sure I probably told a few stories, and maybe we'd like to give you guys a chance to embellish a little on your backgrounds, why you care so much about what we're talking about tonight. Any of you guys want to add to sort of your story?
Can I start?
Sure.
I'm French born, so obviously food. I think, that the quality of food has always been important to me, and I grew up in Paris and then went down to Nice, where I lived in an apartment really like right downtown, and I would walk everywhere, and every morning I had a farmer's market that was just like 7 days a week, and I just enjoyed going there, picking my fruit, vegetables, and going back, and it's been something that's just been part of my life, the quality of food, my whole life, so I think it carries on.
Let's see. Well, I'm making note that you do catering for charities, and just want to get that out there and raise lots of money.
Here.
Yeah. So on that note, yes. So all about connections, and I would say for me, just to embellish that, I love food, or I would not be here doing this work. But I also in life have loved to study languages, and I feel that it is not cliche to say that food is, for me, just another language that year after year I fall more in love with and get kind of better at speaking, and it helps to get to know people, helps me to get to know people better. So I've lived in different places and learned different languages, and food has been the constant. Forgetting the Japanese, but I'm not forgetting how to eat. It's yeah, it's good. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Food for me is a manner in which I express myself to people. I don't think there's anything that really draws people together better than having a meal with people that you truly care about. I think that's the cornerstone, of our society. We are the only entities on this planet that actually cook food. Everyone else out there, the animals and things, they don't have their hibachis and they're not cooking anything. That's what we do. Interestingly enough, when Chris and I spoke the other day, and I started digging a little deeper and started looking at some of the numbers and some of the stats, I was blown away by what I found. And the initial stats that you stated are spot on. That's exactly what I had researched as well. If you're like me, you go through your day and you're not really conscious about kind of what you're doing. Your day kind of goes on autopilot. I think what we need to do, and we'll definitely discuss this more in detail as the talk progresses here, but to be more on purpose, especially when we're talking about food, our food choices, what we put in our body, how we fuel ourselves, to make it more of a conscious part of our day to do that, and not simply autopilot through your day, day after day, until at some point it becomes a problem for each of us. So I really kind of enjoyed that piece of being more on purpose with what I do from our conversation the other day as well. So I want to kind of thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, sir. Maybe building on that a tiny bit. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in a family that was not a very sophisticated food family. Our family recipes generally had words that said, just add water, lift film before warming. Any vegetables that came into my plate obviously were frozen or came in a can. Everyone remembers those broccoli that show up in a brick that you put into boiling water. That was my life until I became a young adult, and then I realized there was an entire other world of food out in front of me. But that was not the family experience I grew up in. I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are on sort of the family experience of food and how that might shape some of this storytelling. Anybody want to take that one?
So food in France is very important, but it's more about the social aspect of food, the gathering around the table, having dinner every night as a family. That was a tradition in my family where we'd finally end the day talking to each other, reconnecting, and food was part of it. And my mom would cook from scratch every meal. And I was, accustomed to fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, fresh everything. I don't think I ate frozen food until I came here.
Until you moved here. We spoiled you the wrong way.
Yeah. So.
It's true, like immigrant experience, right? Like
Yes.
we ruined it for everyone. So I grew up with a father he's a retired landscape architect, and so we did always have a garden. That did not always translate to the plate. I also had plenty of, boxed, processed things as well. And I remember I took a food writing class at one point, probably about 6 years ago, and we were supposed to kind of delve into a recipe that was nostalgic for us, from our family. And I immediately thought of my grandmother, my dad's mom. We called her Tutu. And in Texas, that we didn't really, that's a thing, but I didn't, now I know that tutu is is a word for grandmother. But anyway, so she made banana cream pie. And in my mind, it was this incredible, wonderful, magical dish. And I called my aunt. I was ready to write about it. I did write about it. If you email me, I'll send you the story. It's pretty good. And I found out that really it was a box of Nilla wafers and Jell-O in the box and Cool Whip. There was nothing entirely unique or special about it, but for me, it was everything. I mean, it was all those memories. I could place myself at her house with my cousins and all the things that happened around it. And what I would say, as far as cooking from scratch, I definitely did a lot of that with my family, and I did a lot as a young adult. For the family experience here in our neighborhood in San Jose, where Veggie is located, I think there are a lot of reasons that people don't necessarily cook from scratch, and very few of them have to do with people not knowing how. They don't need education about how to do it. They don't need even to know where to buy the ingredients. They don't have the time because there are so many systemic pressures, housing and other medical, you refer to pressures, that keep them having to work so often that they don't get to enjoy that luxury that they were probably more familiar with, maybe before moving here or otherwise. So I think, that for me, it keeps me going, remembering that banana cream pie experience.
The banana cream pie, the kind of food that you mentioned there, that's just
frozen
a great...
broccoli.
Yeah, frozen broccoli. That's a great first step. The research that I did show that, do you guys know, 70% of the meals that are had outside the home, and ready for this one, 20% are eaten in a car. okay? When I read that, that kind of blew me away. Further studies showed that the more FaceTime families have together around the table, if it is frozen broccoli, it doesn't matter. The first step is to get together as a family. You put the cell phones down, you put the gaming consoles away, and you spend the 20 minutes together with each other for that bonding time. Get to know your kids, know what's happening in their lives. That's something that, personally, that we did as a family. You can't gain that back. Once that time is gone, it's gone forever. You've got to really monopolize on that time. And studies show that the fewer amount of meals that families share together, children don't do as well. The likelihood of obesity is much, much higher. There are problems with school. There's problems with deficit disorders and that sort of thing when you're not together as a family. I got to tell you, going through France for the 2 or 3 weeks that we were there, that's the perfect blueprint. I wish we were able to do that in this country here. Every little village had a little market like you mentioned, or a farmer's market where you'd walk to, you grab your fresh fruit and vegetables for the day. I didn't see SUVs pull up to Costco like probably we all do and load up with so much food. Yeah, and take it home with you. Did you all know that 40%, that's 40% of the food that we either grow or produce in this country is thrown away. It's wasted. We don't even eat it. So here goes the SUV to Costco, and we buy 1,600 pounds of this and all this kind of great stuff we buy from Costco, and we end up throwing almost half of it away. So as part of my challenge to you all, and you guys, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. Everybody looks like you're in pretty good shape here, and you probably don't need to do a lot of the things that I'd like to challenge you on, but make sure you tell your friends, your neighbors, the people that you work with, to get that message out there, and we'll talk about some of these in greater detail as well. But start with the family. Start with enjoying a meal. And time constraints, totally get it. But you know what? What's more important than that? Game of Thrones, so you video it, you watch it later, right? It's not that, really? Can you?
Maybe.
Work with me on this one, yeah. It's really not that big of a deal. Pick it up later. The email you've got to return for work, it could wait for 15 or 20 minutes because, jobs come and jobs go, but your family's your family.
So Bob, we need to double our food production. We're throwing half of it away. I think we solved it.
Yeah.
You know something?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, as trite and as that sounds, each of you out there throw away about 300 pounds of food a year. If we were able just to use the food that we have right now, a quarter of the food that we waste is enough to feed every single person in the world. That's unbelievable, looking at these stats. So what do we need to do? We don't need to make quantum changes here. It's just little changes, little changes. Little changes make big results in the end. So we can, talk about that in greater detail. I could probably talk the whole 45 minutes on this, but I want to have everybody else have a chance to contribute as well. But little changes make big results.
So the beginning part of that conversation was about these kind of social, emotional connections, the family connections, the traditions that are part of food. In many cases, those things, as powerful and meaningful as they are to us, make this kind of change a lot harder. Someone recently mentioned this challenge as being the crisis of our generation. And as I look at that date, 2050, and I think, oh man, that's really, really far away. That's off in the distance. And then I stop and I think, I've got a son at home, he's my youngest. In 2050, he'll be my age right now. And living in this crazy world of abundance where I can have everything I want anytime I need it, it's a shocking thought to think that my own son, sitting here at that time, might be in a world that doesn't have enough food. So we know that there's only so much planet. There's us and there's food. The two of us won't fit in this town. So how do we sustain ourselves in a world that maybe we have to use farmland differently? There isn't enough farmland. How do we handle that situation? Thoughts?
For farmland, you have to think about, global warming and, in terms of sustainability, because that's what I'm going to talk about mainly. Global warming and the fact that we don't want to expand the land. We want to use the land that we have right now. And I think Veggie Lucien is a perfect example. I was just walking around looking at it like, this is exactly what I've been studying. Using the underutilized land. We're by the highway, we're downtown San Jose. This is not a space that promotes farming. However, it's being done. So I think it's it's one element. Other ways are to using like controlled farming methods, like forgot the name, vertical farming, and where basically it's like farming in a building. And the great thing about that is you think about it like you have everything in a building that's controlled, lighting, electricity, energy, water processing, and recyclability. So you have all these elements that you're able to control and that promote less waste, less on toxicity, less carbon footprint. So that's the thing you have to think about is basically trying to find farming ways to control and use less carbon
more
footprint.
with what we have.
Exactly. Yeah. So that would be the sustainability part. And also, I was just going to add, I just read an article. There was, we're talking about rooftops in cities. We have so much land that we're not we're not using. New York City just passed a law of every new building being constructed needs to have a green garden now on top, on the roof.
Imagine
Yes.
if there were more places where we carved out places for farming that we wouldn't normally have them.
Coming, but it's
Sort of like
slow. Yeah.
right here.
Yeah. So all of that, yes. So all of the more sustainable methods of farming, the better utilization, more creative utilization of spaces that we already have, absolutely. And then I think, because what I'm going to, of course, keep coming back to are the people in this equation, and I think that spaces like Veggie Lucien is not the only one, community gardens, places where we have the opportunity to demonstrate on a micro scale for people in their neighborhood what the food system looks like, what a healthy, thriving food system can look like. I think the more advocates we build for these other methods that may be happening on farms or inside of buildings that they may or may not ever visit, but we need all of us to advocate for those more sustainable methods. And so at Veggie Lucien, we believe in 3 very deep truths that our connection to each other, our connection to the land, and our connection to our culture and history are some of the most meaningful things for humans. And so I think that when we can demonstrate food and agriculture in ways that touch on those deep truths, then people want to fight for more sustainable systems. When it seems like it's something that's technology that happens over there, or it's an open space that's only for that kind of community, I think that's when we lose people in this conversation. So anyway, so I guess my point would be, how do we make that happen? We make sure everyone knows what that means and understands why it's important and why they should be connected to those options.
Now, these are great macro ideas, but I want to bring it down to everybody sitting in this room here. So here's what you all need to do. Eat locally. Eat locally, produced and sourced food, farmers markets. How many go to farmers markets? Yeah, thank you for supporting your local farmers. Do more of that. As a chef, I love having food that is locally sourced and locally grown. It's part of that buzzword terroir, if you've heard about that, how the relationship with the soil and the food and everything that comes into contact in that particular area imparts its own characteristic on the food. So please continue to support your farmers markets. Eat smaller portions. Believe it or not, in California right now, 28% of the people in this state are hypertensive, so that means they either need to have or on high blood pressure meds, and diabetes is almost at 11%. So we need to be smarter about what we're eating as well. Again, you all look like you're in pretty good shape here, but you probably know somebody, or you work with somebody, or you've got somebody in the neighborhood. Please talk with these people. Little changes. Next thing you can do, just eat less beef, eat less meat. I'm sure you've all heard of that with the inherent issues with that, but with the greenhouse gases that are produced by beef, grazing lands have to be much larger to accommodate cattle. There are awesome, and believe me, fantastic alternatives to beef out there. I didn't eat tofu a couple years ago, but man, I love this stuff now. I cook it all the time, and it's part of my diet now. Okay, here's another great idea. Grow your own food. If you live in an apartment and you have a little windowsill, fresh herbs. Herbs are so good on your food. It heightens the flavor of the food. It's easy to do. If you've got a garden in the backyard, like we have raised beds, we have zucchini and squash and beans and tomatoes all summer long. During the winter, we've got cauliflower, we've got broccoli. It's easy to do. My wife does it, but it's pretty easy to do all that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, don't be dependent on anyone else. Do it yourself. Another great thing, compost as well. We compost the soil that you get that is created with the worms and the interaction that they have with the foods that we compost. That goes right back in the garden. So although we do waste the food because it goes in the compost, we're using it again, and circle of life kind of thing. What we have goes right back into the earth. And then again, I said this before, and I'll say it again, but spend time as a family and have family meals together. So the macro ideas are great. It's something that's a little out of our grasp, and I don't have the answer on how to do a garden on a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, because I guess they're going to stop building skyscrapers in Manhattan now, which I just heard yesterday. But you can do these things yourself. And again, the little small course corrections and the little changes that you make to your daily life, just be more present and think about what you're doing, seriously, can have a huge impact.
So this conversation about diets, and maybe even also this local component. 100 years ago, we didn't have a choice. All food was local. No other way really around it. We also didn't really define ourselves by the food we eat. We simply just ate food. But today, we are vegetarians, we are vegans, we are pescatarians, we are paleo. We are all these things, and those names define ourselves. How do you guys feel about this idea of diets having that role in self-definition? And maybe how do you think that might change in the future if food and food delivery is different?
I think it's there's more demand for healthier food now, and people are more aware of their body wellness and eating the right, food, and eating more vegetarian, less meat. And I think it's part of the it's going to evolve. There's some diets that are not existent yet, and things are going to move forward towards something different. 10 years ago, we were not eating kale. Now we have kale chips and kale everything, and ice cream, or I don't know. But so it really evolved with the issue of the time, and I think on a sustainable level, I'm happy to see that wellness is more and more important, because it brings awareness of ecological concerns as well. So I think it's a global movement.
I don't know how popular this will be, but I don't like to talk about diets. I don't personally diet. I think so that part is a tough one for me. I think it can, food can be beautiful and uplifting, and it can connect us, and it can also, for some people, it can be very painful. It can be problematic. It can not be as easy to access or enjoy, and so I think diets can just perpetuate that sometimes. So the idea of you need to be on a diet, as a woman, see this right and left, so even the word diet can, I think, just strike in some or all of us, I don't know. I stay very active, so I don't have to think about dieting for those reasons. But I'm lucky, that's great for me. And so I'm not a big fan of the word diet. I think that as far as how we define ourselves, vegan or vegetarian, or kind of signaling to others how we want to eat, I think that's very personal preference. I have friends and family and colleagues who do a little bit of everything. And I think what's most important is that there's space for everyone to define themselves or not through food in the way that suits them and makes them feel good and connected. I wonder if outside of the US, I've traveled, but I hadn't traveled thinking this, how many other places really do this? I mean,
They eat what's there.
yeah, and I think, I don't want to say one is exactly right or exactly wrong, but I think that there's probably maybe a healthier way, a more enjoyable way to think about how we define ourselves with food. Maybe we define it, in other countries, I definitely have seen people who define it more about, with regards to how it connects them to their ancestors, or how it connects them to their neighborhood, or how it connects them to their garden, just what's growing, what they're able to grow. But yeah, while I respect it absolutely, I kind of wish, I guess, that we didn't have to have so many classifications in order for people to respect our space with food.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. The only issue I have with that is when you label something, you run the risk of alienating something or alienating somebody. There may not be enough education out there to fully understand what it is. If you want to eat whatever it is you want to eat, from my perspective as a chef, I'm okay with that, but as long as you get all the nutrients you need, as long as you're eating a good balanced diet, I'm okay with that. Obviously, I have a point of view and a perspective from which I create my menus and how I present my food. I do think it's important to accommodate, different people's styles of eating and what they like to eat as well. So for me, it's all good. Again, as long as you're following the things that we mentioned, before, the things that you can do to take control of what's happening, all good with that. But just be healthful about what you're doing. So I think some people get caught doing the right things for the wrong reasons, like gluten. Oh, I've got to be gluten-free. I've got to be gluten-free. If you have celiac or you're a gluten intolerant, boy, you really know it. That's a pretty serious deal. But just to do it because you don't want to eat the flour or you don't want to do whatever, that might be a little misguided. So I would just suggest that you do a little bit more research on that and don't get caught up. Everything is so trendy. It's like you mentioned kale. Don't get caught up in it. Research it, see if it's for you, and that's fine. Like all the different diets that are out there. We talked about diet for a minute. I've got to eat all carbs. I eat no carbs. I eat all fat. I eat no fat. I eat this. I eat bananas. You just be cognizant with what you're doing. Do the research on it and make sure that it's good for you. Don't get swept away with the things that kind of happen in society sometimes.
Do you think that as we face some of these challenges, like the impact that raising livestock has on our environment, that more people will begin choosing to make changes in their diet for social or environmental purposes and reasons? Or do you think we'll stick back to our old trends of who we are and how we've always defined ourselves?
No, I think we're definitely going towards the right direction. Look at 10 years ago, you couldn't find any organic food anywhere. And now Walmart sells it. If Walmart says it, there's a shift.
Gotcha.
So,
The Walmart rule.
exactly.
Yeah.
So definitely think, we're going towards a better direction.
That's the $64,000 question right there. Seriously, are you on board with this or not? And if you're not, continue doing what you're doing, and 1 in 10 of us will have diabetes, and 1 in 5 of us will be on blood pressure meds, and 28% of us will be obese, and those numbers will just get higher and higher. By the year 2050, I read that the normal diet will consist of about 3,700 or 3,800 calories. So if you're sedentary and you're sitting around, this is your son, and they'll probably have virtual reality, whatever's then, and you probably don't go to work, you just sit down and you work virtually with whatever's going on in 20 to 30 years from now. That's the problem that we'll have. So again, it's how proactive do you want to be now so that you can do some of these things that we talked about, so that way when we get to that spot in the future that we don't have to face these harsh realities that may or may not be there for us to deal with at that time.
Well, and so some of this is really an education challenge, right? And we've been woefully awful about educating ourselves about the impact of food and its impact on our health and the environment and our social connectedness. You know, the most common causes of death in the United States are self-inflicted, and they are disease-related, and they are food disease-related. We are eating ourselves to death. And even if we fix this infrastructure problem, how do we fix ourselves? How do we help ourselves care and learn about these challenges? Any thoughts on how we do that? I assume some of that's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that's happening here. I think it's happening here. We certainly, I mean, this touches a little bit, you know, back on the question we were just answering or grappling with, but you know, our approach at Veggielution is not actually to tell people what to eat. It is to show them. It is to create a safe and inviting space where there are options. Yes, and they are very much plant-based. And from there, we find that people reconnect to a lot of very kind of, you know, ancient historical knowledge that oftentimes is just under the surface. So I think I have a lot of faith in human nature. I know we can do a lot of bad things, and we can do a lot of bad things to ourselves, even, you know, in our health. But I think that given access to the right spaces, comfortable, safe, family-oriented, with healthy outdoor, interactions, I think that inside of all of us there is a lot of will to do better by ourselves and for our community. But there aren't a lot of spaces like this. I think there are more spaces that are not designed like this. And ours isn't even fully designed here. We wouldn't be here. So I think more spaces that give people that option to think about it for themselves and to have access to some of the tools that they need and the spaces they need is critical for making those changes.
Yeah, and education, you hit upon a very important point there. The more educated a person is, the less likelihood that they, at some point in their lives, will become obese. It's actually 13%, which is pretty big. So I think education is definitely the key there. I'm sorry. There's another huge factor here. We live in probably one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in the entire world. I don't think, you know, the socioeconomic piece of this is also extremely difficult to grapple with. People live from paycheck to paycheck. It's just damn difficult to live here. It really is. So when you try to focus on buying organic foods and vegetables and eating the right way, it's difficult for some people to actually do that because they don't have the finances to do that. You know, half to 2/3 of their income goes just for housing, just to make sure that there is a place to sleep at night. Another huge issue there. So I have no idea how we grapple with that issue. That's something that is well above my pay grade, but something to consider. Again, maybe with all this food that we're wasting, 40% of it, maybe there's something we can do on a co-op kind of a basis where we charge less for food to have people actually come and eat it. So that, you know, might be an idea that we think about as well.
Bob, you mentioned California. You know, for all of us who live here, we're probably very acutely aware of the impact of water on our lives here and on certainly the impact on food. I'm curious, someone mentioned bananas a moment ago. Anyone in the audience want to offer how many gallons of water do you think it takes to grow a banana?
That's a good question.
Grow it where?
27 gallons of water to grow a banana. And here in California, an almond, one gallon of water. Now, California's done a lot of work to try to reduce that for the almond industry to get it down to about 30% less than that. But that's an incredible waste of water. I'm curious to know, and I think Severin might have a lot of thoughts on this, you know, what might we do in the future to think about the sustainability of that situation, using less water, finding ways to work around that challenge?
So using less water, it goes back to wasting less, trying to collect the natural resources instead of abusing the earth. And there's a lot of rain. I mean, we had so much rain recently, and none of us is collecting it. So collecting rainwater would be one way. There's also filtering gray water. Gray water is like, something that's like slightly stained water from your dishes or your laundry, or that you can recycle and reuse for watering plants. And there's also another major thing that we definitely need to take on is desalination of ocean water, because it's right there, and we can just it's basically reusing our resources instead of depleting them. So.
When you mentioned vertical farming before, where we're just getting just the right amount, just to the roots.
Right amount, exactly. Instead of wasting, you control the growth. Yeah.
Actually, I've got this one solved for you.
Oh.
No problem. Do you remember that 40% of the food that we waste? It takes 25% of our water supply to create that 40% of the food that we waste. Mm-hmm. So if we're more efficient with the food that we have and we don't simply discard it and throw it away, 25% of that water supply comes back to us. So again, that's each and every one of you here. Before you throw that banana out that might be a little black, why don't you cut it up and throw it in the freezer? And the next time you want a smoothie, you pull that out and you use that.
Or can't do it.
Or yes, you can.
I can't do it.
Yes, you can. You can do it.
Banana bread.
Oh boy, you said banana bread? Oh, banana bread. But just those little things. So I couldn't believe that 25% of our water supply goes to create food that we don't even eat. So if we're able to tighten that up, I'll get you 25% of that water back.
Bob's got all the answers.
Yeah.
If they're only that simple, but it's all of you.
But that reduces our carbon footprint too.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And then just to go macro, as I've been doing it, but our watershed. So we talked about education, about different things. Our watershed and a healthy ecosystem, a healthy watershed is what ensures that we have water at all. So I think it's really important for everyone to understand what their local and what their local watershed is. And then back to your point of eating locally, when you grow, and not everyone can grow vegetables in their backyard. They may grow in the community garden. They may not have time or space to grow it at all. But when we grow our own or buy as close to us as we can, and when we all advocate for strengthening our local food system so that everyone can buy locally, it reduces the amount of times, frankly, that we need to apply water to that food that we eat. If you're buying food from Costco, if you're buying vegetables from Costco, it is likely that, so there was water that was needed to grow the plant that produced the seed that later was shipped, because there's water there, to the farmer to plant the seed that he waters, that grows up, and he waters, and then she cuts it, right, harvests it, rinses it, packs it, sends it to a wholesaler. They rinse it again. They maybe send it to a restaurant, or maybe it's to Safeway, or maybe it's to Costco. You bring it home, and what's the first thing you do? You wash it. It's like there's just so much water built in, and the longer it travels, the more we apply. And that's not even counting like I said, the water that goes into it before it gets, to plant form. So eating as locally as possible and working as hard as we can to make that possible for everybody, I think is super important for saving water.
Coming back local again, we live in a pretty awesome place. Silicon Valley is a pretty awesome spot, but we have a tendency sometimes to believe that technology will fix everything. I'm pretty sure here the most important technology you guys probably have is like a shovel and some sweat.
Yep.
And so I'm kind of curious to know if your thoughts as a group here, is this a technology problem? Will technology fix this? Or is the solution somewhere else?
I think technology can fix it, because going back to controlling the crops and the way we grow, we can use technology to our advantage. And that would be, we can grow, if we do vertical and growing building, we can go anywhere. We can go all year long. We're not limited by the climate or the climate change or even what do you call that? Climate disasters or anything. Everything is controlled. So we're building less carbon footprint. We're in control of the crops. We can grow anything anywhere. So I think technology, and also using technology will create jobs in research and development on how to make sure we can grow as, you know, as much as possible in a very time frame, as, you know, as using little space as possible. So I'm totally for technology.
One vote for technology. Any
Although
dissenters?
I have a totally other point of view, and that goes back to the sense of community when you have a place like this. Our children are on phones and technology all the time. They have no idea how to cook an egg or even, you know, how to grow a bed of lettuce or anything. So I think a sense of, you know, going to grow your own vegetables as a family in the backyard or coming to a community garden like that reestablishes a sense of family, of community that grounds them. So I'm half and half.
Half and half, okay. She hedged.
Yeah, she did. No, I think technology is a good thing, certainly. We have some pretty awesome new technology back at Veggie Lucien. We don't have electricity, but we have this, it's called an aerated static pile compost system. It relies on, because we don't have electricity, this great solar array that connects to an inverter that powers the blower, and the blower forces air underneath this pile of compost, which reduces the amount of labor to turn it. It's pretty new. It doesn't work because we need people to come out and help us get it going. You know, so
volunteers.
So technology, volunteer, solar technicians. So technology and people for sure. And I want to credit this next little bit to Emily, because we prepped together for this yesterday a little. You know, I was talking about how, you know, I can get a little down on technology sometimes, but I do think it's really important to consider that technology is going to be critical for getting some people out of some really backbreaking, awful labor. We do need technology to you know, raise all ships and get us out of, you know, some of the work that no one should have to do on their own, and that, you know, I think the right technology can help assist with. And then Emily said, you know, sure, and are the same companies that invent that technology can also put those people back to work doing something else then? So I think if technology displaces people, takes, this is not a zero-sum game, I get that, but as we think about technology to take over certain jobs and sort of solve certain problems, I think we also want to think about what that means, you know, elsewhere. But I absolutely see a place for technology in agriculture, both for safety, for climate, for sustainability, for, you know, for productivity, and just think the big picture I think is important to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, the bigger picture, I think I see technology helping the supply chain and supply chain management. So that's moving food, you know, from farm to table, from fork to store, whatever you want to call that piece. So I see efficiencies there. Show of hands of anybody that uses either Google Assistant, you have an Alexa at home, in the office. I can't tell you how many times I've said, Alexa, Bobby Flay Chipotle relish recipe. And you get whatever you need like that. So, you know, the resources are there. There's videos. There's anything you need, you know, to be self-sufficient with doing these things. That again, I keep kind of preaching the same thing, the same kind of thing. But I think that's where it starts at a grassroots level here at Veggie Lucien, and something that you can all take home with you as action items that I want you to all kind of start to think with more purpose and act with more purpose and do things with more purpose and think along those lines. Let technology be your friend when it comes to sourcing information that you use it for, you know, to create your meals at home. You know, cooking really is a very simple thing. It really isn't difficult if you just take the time to kind of learn. I mean, I could teach you all in this room right now in 5 minutes how to make like 25 different kinds of soup. With what? With the stuff in your fridge that's starting to go maybe a little bit south. It's a perfect time to use those things, and it's perfectly fine You're not going to get sick from this, but instead of, again, the banana that's got a little black on the outside, instead of throwing that out, let's go ahead and make a smoothie. The carrots, let's go ahead and make a soup with the carrots, the onions, the other fruits and vegetables that you have in the fridge. Let's go ahead and repurpose those. In the restaurant business, you have to do that. If not, you're going to go out of business because margins are so tight. I call it either repurposing foods or make sure that if something doesn't go today, that's going to be tomorrow's special. And that's not a bad thing. Because again, the alternative is throwing food away, having 25% less water, and all the other cascading things that we talked about that are a detriment to society. So again, I'm going to keep on pointing to you all here to be the ambassadors, to go out there and spread the word, because it happens at this level. And I kind of mentioned before that on the socioeconomic issue, I can't really help with that, but I think I can, because studies show, believe it or not, women in the audience here, if I was able to put $4,700 in your pockets on a yearly basis, and guys, $2,700, would that be of interest to you? I think you'd probably say yes. How does that happen? Well, obesity costs in this country, that's what it is. That's what it costs to be obese in this country. And that's across the entire United States here. So again, being more purposeful, eating better, helping the environment out. You can also put a couple of dollars in your pockets. You can go out there and get the organic vegetables and fruits that we talked about as well. It's a cycle here. It really is, guys. And you got to take control of this, because if not, it's going to take control of you, and it's going to sweep you in its wake. So be in control of this.
So I think we have time maybe for one last question. Awesome.
I'm going to give you 5 minutes more.
Perfect. Whoa, I got loud. So maybe coming full circle to our topic, the future of food. Question for the audience. Anybody here had an Impossible Burger? Yeah. Verdicts, yes, yay, or nay? Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, not too bad. So my question for you guys, what are the foods that we are not eating that we will be eating or should be eating in this future state?
They don't exist yet.
Maybe, or maybe they just aren't popular yet.
Yeah, well, it's all related.
Insects.
Cricket flour.
Yeah, insects. I've heard insects. I've heard inhaling smells too, like inhaling a smell of chocolate instead of eating it. You don't get the calories, but you can smell it.
Interesting theory.
Yeah, some future things. I've also heard about, and that goes back to, keeping your vegetables longer or not throwing anything away, that there are technologies now that are studying packaging that keep your food good longer. So in a longer shelf life, so you're not throwing so much away. So you buy less, you keep, longer, and that way, less waste, less carbon footprint, the usual. So.
Yeah, I think that it will be somewhat of some discovering foods, rediscovering foods that have probably lost favor a little bit. Again, credit where credit is due. I asked Emily, what would you say the future food is? And she said, the foods of yesterday. So that's, yeah, right? I loved it too. I did not say it first. She said it. And so I started to think about that a little more. She's right there, yeah. And I think that is going to be really important, because people didn't eat as much meat before. Hasn't been true across the globe, really. Historically, people ate very modestly. When it came to some of the things that are really wrecking our food system now, it's true. Beef being one of them. But I get a little like, when I think about how do we package it better, and how can it be more like astronaut food and stuff like that. That's going to be really important in some places. It's not just here. I mean, there are places in the world that are incredibly disproportionately being impacted by climate change. I mean, the hotter, poorer countries are suffering so much worse than the cooler, more affluent countries. And so, I mean, we're going to definitely have to think about it, but there are places that are already
feeling it now.
Right here, yeah, with it. And so I think, sure, like those of us who work in professions where we can contribute to that conversation and can move that along, even if we don't need to be there quite yet, like eating the cricket flour or the whatever, we ought to get out there and contribute to the development of those kinds of foods and systems to support our global neighbors as well. And then at the same time, as long as we have that, like you were describing that kind of privilege of being able to still eat whole, delicious foods, an Impossible Burger was fine, but I mean, we're not there yet. We don't have to eat the Impossible Burger. There are great bean burgers still too, if that's the thing, that I think we should continue to keep those traditions alive too, those traditions of cooking from whole, nutrient-dense, historically and culturally relevant foods, as we are also exploring other options, not only for ourselves, but for those that are really, really impacted by it right now. So, not to be doomsday. There's a lot of creativity and innovation and connection that comes from that, but I think we just have to constantly think about ourselves not as an island, not isolated from the greater question of food. So.
Yeah, someone mentioned looking back to look forward. That's one of my favorite things. You've got to look back to look forward. This is not going to be a big surprise to you. What are we going to be eating? Here's what we should be eating. Plant-based proteins, fish, chicken, poultry, turkey, fruits, vegetables, grains, whole grains. We talked about ancient grains. Farro, delicious. Did anybody have farro in here? Yeah, thank you. Farro is delicious. That's it. I mean, it's that simple. Why do I say that? Here's what the normal diet consists of in this country. Solid fats and added sugars, refined grains, sodium, and saturated fat. What I just mentioned has none of that in it. Nothing. That's what we're eating. Now, I don't think the folks in this room are eating that. And again, be an evangelical, go out there and talk to your friends, neighbors, and your coworkers on this sort of thing. But it's simple. It's that simple. Just eat the right things, and that'll put us on a great path.
So Bob, Casey, and Severin, I'd love to thank you guys for your time tonight. I know the audience really appreciated tonight's conversation, so thank you guys.
Very welcome. Thank you all.